Hello, I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covering environmental matters on the island of Ireland. And I'm happy today to be here in Dublin at Taylor's Hall, which is the headquarters for An Taisce, the National Trust of Ireland. I'm here with Charles Stanley-Smith. Charles, you're very welcome.
Good morning.
Charles, what's your position with An Taisce?
I'm currently Communications Director and on the board of An Taisce. I'm the former chairman. We rotate our chairs after about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So I did my stint and I'm now still on the board, but just doing communications.
And if you could, for the audience, because the audience does come from a variety of places, give the audience a sense of what An Taisce is and what it does.
An Taisce, as you say, is the National Trust for Ireland. It was formed in 1948 by a number of people, including Lloyd Prager, who you might possibly have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very well-known environmentalist at the time, an ecologist. And it was formed to protect the historic core, the historic parts of the country for the people of Ireland. Mm-hmm. And it was an interesting phrase used against ravages caused by both people and nature, I think, or something like that. So he well understood the threats to historic properties, but also the natural and the environment as well.
Now, how many, originally in 1948, were there certain properties given to
No,
Taisce at the time?
No, what happened then, shortly after its formation, there was a few properties like Kanturk was actually still in those days in the hands of the English National Trust, because there had been an Irish National Trust in the past, in the 1800s, and early 1900s, and they had a number of properties, you know, given to them or whatever, one of which was Kanturk. And then obviously, you know, with the breakup of the country and all that kind of stuff, there wasn't then an Irish National Trust afterwards. So it just stayed with the English National Trust for a while. Then, as I say, after An Taisce had been formed for a while, they said, well, you know, you're the Irish National Trust, we'll give it back to you. So they did. And there was a ceremony, as far as I remember, sometime in the 50s or the 60s. I'm not exactly sure, before my time.
Could you give the audience a sense of the other kinds of the range of properties, both historic buildings and also natural reserves and spaces?
Well, obviously the most important one we have is here in Taylor's Hall, which is the only existing guild hall. Going back over the years, there was guilds. There was the Merchant Tailors Guild, which is the hall, and each guild was a place where they would meet and they would discuss things. And they would also have upstairs here, where we currently have offices, was sleeping quarters for trainee tailors. And the reason for the big windows and all that here is that they would use this space to learn as a learning space, but also before you could become a proper tailor, you had to have your stuff looked at. So, you know, you'd come in here and there'd be, in fact, I think there was benches along there and benches along there. Yeah. And you would present your latest suit or whatever it may be, and they'd go through it and make sure the thing was properly made and so on. So they needed the light for that.
The building, Taylor's Hall, was built in
1703.
1703
is this building, yeah. There had obviously been, I think there's a wooden building here before.
Okay.
And actually some of the interesting about a wooden building, not this part, but that part of it is a wood frame building.
So that was the original.
Yeah.
Now, besides the Kanturk Castle and the Taylor's Hall, what other buildings?
We have, other buildings that we would have is Howth Courthouse, which again was given to us, well, I'm not quite sure, again, sort of about the 50s or the 60s. They gave up using it as a courthouse and were looking for somebody to look after it. And they entrusted it to An Taisce then.
And so when you're given a property, it really becomes the responsibility of An Taisce to raise the funds to physically maintain it. And some of the buildings are open to the public generally, but some are just by appointment.
I mean, this is generally open to the public. We're here at 9 to 5 most days, so it is open to the public. And we do open it and we use it, and we will let people use it for local meetings and so on. So, you know, any local groups that want a meeting place, it's available. The other places like Howth is generally open, I think, in the summer a lot more than it is at any other time.
And what are some of the kind of examples of natural spaces that you have responsibility for?
The other areas which we have very strong responsibility is quite several thousand acres of bog. One up in Mayo and one in Offaly by Shannon Bridge. And the reason we have those is to we keep them, we don't do anything with them. We let them be bogs. And we certainly don't let anybody in to cut them or anything else like this. So they're a great, you know, reserve of biodiversity and so on. And, you know, if people want to come in and do research on them as well, because the whole area, which is a very important thing about bogs as well as being the biodiversity and all that, is as a carbon sink in terms of climate change. And in recent times, I've seen figures which say that per acre there is 30 or 40 times as much carbon in an acre of bog than there is in an acre of rainforest. So when we go giving out to the Brazilians for cutting down rainforests, we ought to be very careful about what we're saying that in terms of what we're doing in terms of digging up bogs.
Now, that's interesting, Charles, because typically when people think of national trust, such as in Ireland or in the UK, it is about preserving buildings in some spaces, but you've raised the whole issue of climate change. And how has An Taisce become involved with the whole issue of climate change, and when did that?
Well, it's something which I can't give you this is when we started, because it wasn't. It sort of grew on us. We began to realize that, you know, the effects of climate change on different areas, like, I mean, planning. The whole area which we've been fighting for a very long time against is urban sprawl and the like. And the fact that people have to drive everywhere. Driving is causing climate change. In more recent times, we've been very involved in looking at agriculture and the amount of climate change that causes. And, you know, the whole of the Food Harvest 2020 plan at the minute, which is, okay, we're not against Ireland increasing its agricultural output and making more money at agriculture, but is it going about doing this in the right way? Is that going to increase the amount of methane and the like by increasing the number of cattle? And is that going to have a knock-on effect into climate change? And it's all very well the government are currently saying we're going to feed the world, but actually maybe the increases in climate change are having a really bad knock-on effect in sub-Saharan Africa, where the farming is very marginal, and climate change is going to destroy that. So is us producing more over here having a knock-on effect down there? So it's a very large discussion has to be had, which in our opinion has yet to be had properly in this country.
Now, also, I mean, I've interviewed Ian Lumley from An Taisce about planning, which has been very active for years, and the Green Schools program, which you have too, which also is teaching people and kids on climate change and those issues. So it's
my other thing I do is I'm chair of the Green the Education Unit Committee.
Oh, you are
as well.
at Taisce.
Good job. I forgot about that one.
But so that's kind of embedded in throughout the whole structure of An Taisce.
It is, and that, just to mention one thing about the Green Schools, I mean, that was started by, as you know, by Pat Oliver about 14 years ago. And I was, you know, in recent times, say about 4 or 5 years ago, we went to a number of the universities and said, would you have green schools in the university, green campus? And we got no buy-in. But a couple of years ago, the first kids that had been to primary school, gone to secondary school, and it's green schools in each, arrived in the university and said, where is? And that to me was the proof that the kids get it, they're getting it.
Yes.
Which is a great move to us, and we're really kind of hopeful that this will carry on through, because they're now demanding green campuses in universities.
Now, Charles, what have you found that the National Trust in other countries, Northern Ireland, UK, and throughout Europe, have also kind of engaged with climate change in ways they never did before?
Very much so, because we had here in Dublin, 2011, I think, the meeting of the International National Trust Organization, of which we're a founder member, which has national trusts in 25, 30 different countries around the world. From some quite small ones, but right to the Americans involved, the UK and so on. And climate change is very important to them.
In terms of one of the interesting challenges for An Taisce and other national trust organizations is that you do have this responsibility for these beautiful old buildings. And how are you trying to deal with the impacts from climate change and adaptation issues with these old properties?
Well, yes, for us, I don't think any of our properties are going to be that specifically affected by climate change, but obviously in other countries they do have much bigger problems of low-lying properties. Here in Taylor's Hall, we're actually at the top of the hill at Dublin Castle and all that. The reason it was built here in the first place was because of that. So that area is not going to affect us. But what we are looking at is the fact, like buildings like this, they have a huge amount of CO2 built into the building because it's built. It's all the if we're not using new concrete or new stuff to build a new building. So yes, the whole preservation of old buildings is actually a positive thing in terms of climate change because you're not building new ones. But from our point of view also, what's interesting is, a building like this, a room like this, how do you insulate this space without affecting its historic character? How do you go about putting solar panels, on the roof or whatever it may be, on an old 1703 building, So there's a lot of research that we can do and are doing in that space to help others go about increasing the insulation or whatever it is of their building.
I also see that you're designing and developing a rainwater harvesting system for the Taylor's Hall.
This was again forced on us because for two reasons actually, as we discovered that the River Liffey even does back up into this area.
It does so.
So I mean, again, we're pushing around the country for the whole idea of people being responsible for resources and resource usage. So we have to do it ourselves, and so we have rainwater harvesting butts at the minute, but we're looking at doing it at a slightly grander scale in terms of the size of the tanks that we can incorporate the water in. The other thing we have is the International National Trust Organization. It's a very strong organization right around the world, and so we do we do hear what they're doing in the UK, where they would be doing a lot more of that kind of stuff than we would. It's interesting enough, An Taisce has always been much more of an advocacy, we've always advocated more maybe than other national trusts.
And that is true. I mean, I noticed that An Taisce is much more politically advocating positions on planning climate change
and so on. It's just something, I think that the founders, Prager and the like, were very much, in that mode of, as I said, I can turn up his actual wording, but it's, against people, blackguards and the like,
Yes. Well, there's still a lot more to advocate for, Charles, so we hope you keep it up.
Yes.
Thanks for talking with us today.
Okay, Bob, thanks very much.
Cheers.